Okay, here we go on Programmable Logic Controllers 3, Week 1. We're going to be talking about Allen Bradley hardware and firmware, and you can watch the video link here, and we can go over some of this stuff. If you need to watch the video again or not sure about some stuff, it'll be there for you. So we're going to sign in the syllabus. We want to talk about that. That is out there on D2L. There's going to be some changes as we go, but basically the grading scale is kind of the same as it was before. Going to be doing maybe not as much homework, not as much many quizzes and stuff like that, but a lot of it's going to be pretty lab intensive. Textbook, same as last time. Plus, there's going to be a lot of D2L documents that I'll post out there. The safety policy, I'll have you sign that and turn it in. And basically the way that this is going to go, and I want to be sure that everybody's good on this, is we're scheduled for 8 hours a week, and I know everybody's kind of busy, got some things going on with work and everything like that. So if you're not here for 4 hours and 4 hours, it might be like we might do a 2-hour lecture and quiz, and this could potentially be online, synchronous or asynchronous, or recorded, and then definitely 4 hours of lab time, and we'll figure out if you want to do Tuesday or Thursday, or Tuesday and Thursday, and then kind of 2 hours of range. People talking about coming in, when they're available on Saturdays, whatever. So, but I'm willing to work with everybody kind of on this to see how the lecture and lab is going to work out here. So this is a new class that hasn't really been run very times, and there's really lots of different material that we can cover. And basically we can work together to be sure that you're learning lots of good stuff. Some of these labs you think, well, it could take a week or a week and a half or 2 weeks. We can do that. We don't need to keep pounding through. I want to be sure that you're getting a lot of hands-on stuff out of here and having fun. You will need to be able to work independently. A lot of the reading and stuff like that I dig through when setting this up, I expect you, or I will want you to read through that as well. And I'll be posting a lot of stuff on D2L, and I expect you to find some time to work through the labs. And just remember that if I'm not there for the lab, just keep working. And if you have hardware and software issues, that's just the way it is. We'll get it figured out. Just keep me kind of posted on your progress, but try not to get too far behind. Okay. So Allen Bradley firmware. So this is kind of what we're going to talk about is Allen Bradley firmware and the Allen Bradley hardware that we've got, because we've got a bunch of new devices that we're going to be working with. And so we're going to talk about how to get it all configured. And this is kind of especially important, or kind of interesting, this term, is because Windows 10 end of life cycle is coming up in, I think, October of 25, which means we're going to be moving everything over to Windows 11, okay? Now, the issue is that Windows 11, there's a lot of compatibility issues with the hardware and the software and everything working, and that's with older equipment, but actually newer equipment too. That's just kind of an Allen Bradley thing. This is where, Allen Bradley software and hardware, getting through it and getting everything to work is a job in itself, and can be very lucrative if you can keep everything configured and running the way that it should. So with that said, as we work through, we're going to have some problems here with the hardware and the software, and I'll be talking about a little bit today about that. And that's just run of the course. And so as we get over to Windows 11, I might be learning just as much as you about why stuff's working or why it isn't working. But, this is well timed to talk about some of this stuff. Okay, so the first thing that I want you to do is to create an account on the Allen Bradley download site. And so what I like to do is just go to AB download site. You can type AB download site, and then there's I don't like that. Why did it come up like that? I don't think this is what I want right here. That's kind of fancy. Let's try that again. Let's just do AB download. Oh, that was kind of cool, whatever that is. The download manager, but no, this is what I want right here, the download center. So if you, and it says Rockwell Automation /UK, that's the download center. And this is where you want to create an account. You see SH, I'm already here, to download the latest firmware activations and everything. And what you'll be doing when you get this set up is use your email and use the right password you're going to remember, because when we do, we'll do downloads and product compatibility and download center. We'll be doing a lot of stuff here with, find downloads, and basically you'll type in here what you want, and we'll be downloading stuff for the class. So got to use an email and password that you're going to remember. And the password is a bit crazy because it's like, I think it's like 15 characters with special characters and everything like that. So I always forget what mine is. I'm glad the computer keeps me logged in. But get your account created on the Allen Bradley download site. All right, hardware versus firmware. So basically, especially with like the controllers that we're using, the firmware of this hardware, the Allen Bradley hardware, has to match the software revision that you're using. And we saw some of this stuff on the HMIs as well. What were we compiling to? Version 7, version 8, version 9, it's all the way up to version 15. So a lot of this hardware and firmware needs to match. And now you throw in the change from Windows 10 to Windows 11 and getting everything to work. Like I said, it's going to be a bit of a bear, but that's what we're working on this time. Another maybe the main example is we programmed the 5571 processor that was flashed to version 24. That was the firmware version we flashed the processor to. And then we used Studio 5000 or Logix 5000 version 24. 24 matches 24, okay? But now Studio 5000, I think, currently is available in revision up to 37, and I've got it downloaded. And if we would like the processor to use that, we need to flash the processor up to 37. So 37 will match 37, okay? Now, if you get to a processor that's too old, it might only, some processors only work up to version 21 or version 16 just because they're older, okay? And then the problem with that is that these older RS Logix 5000 or Studio 5000 versions, they don't run on Windows 11. They might not even run on Windows 10, okay? And so that's where you get in industry, is that you have all these different hardware and firmware revisions, equipment, software, and they are not backwards compatible. Just because you have the latest and greatest software doesn't mean that all of a sudden all your hardware is going to work. It must match. Hardware and firmware must match. And so that's what you get. You get equipment that is set up, 10 years ago with a certain firmware, and it doesn't need to be modified. It runs for like 10 years, and then all of a sudden you want to do something to it. And at that point, you need older versions of the software, and so they must be available. Well, then you get compatibility, Windows 8, Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows XP, whatever. So what you end up with is companies running virtual machines. So they will set their computer up and they'll launch a virtual machine of a window. I got virtual machines at home where I run Windows XP, for example, if I want to access some older equipment with some older software and everything like that. And that's what they'll do. And that's what they're going to be doing here. And we're going to try and do it here, get it set up. Might be a good thing for us to do, to set up a computer that has a virtual machine of Windows 10 that's actually running on a Windows 11 machine, so that we can access this and keep all the firmware and hardware all talking to each other, okay? So as we go through this process right here, we'll be using RS Links, and that's that communication software that talks between the two. This is Logix Designer. Where is RS Links? There it is, right there. And so, if you remember, this is what RS Links looks like. You set up different drivers. Here's a DF1 driver. That's when we were doing asynchronous serial communications. Here's an Ethernet driver, and it's showing, my devices here. Now, and we'll get into this a little bit, setting up an Ethernet driver. And here I've added another device, another Ethernet device driver, because I've got different networks here, .1, .10. And so we will get into quite a bit of networking in here, but we do need to remember how to use RS Links, and especially we need to know how to use Ethernet to get set up, okay? And so most of the equipment that we're using is newer, and it can be connected initially using a USB to B cable. and that is wonderful. A US A to B cable, it's just plug and play. If you remember from the last class, boom, it acknowledges it. So when you use a US A to B cable, it gets populated over here, and you can dive in and start seeing your equipment and looking at some properties of your equipment and such like that. You can't necessarily do all your communication over the A to B cable. You still need it. Ethernet. You still need, because that's what we're doing, is using Ethernet. But it is a great way to set the equipment up. Okay, we still need the Ethernet configuration in order to fully utilize our equipment, and that's what we will be doing. So what we're going to be doing, we'll be using the Stratix 5700 managed switch, and we'll be getting a lot more into the Stratix. It's a level 2 switch, but we're going to set it up for VLAN routing, and so that we can create multiple VLANs on the switch. But right now we're gonna just use it as kind of an unmanaged switch, even though it's been managed just a little bit. But we will definitely get into managing it. Okay. And then we're going to have a 5581 ES safety controller. I'm going to give that to you for the first lab. It's kind of fresh out of the box. You'll go and set it up. We got the old 5571 controller that we had, and then I got a LR16 compact logic controller for you. We also have the 5370 controllers that we use for the capstone. So we'll be using a variety of different equipment, and at times we'll be setting them up on different networks, having them talk to each other, having them share data. And once again, we'll be using panel view, HMIs, kinetic circle drive controllers. We can use the PowerFlex drive, the cognitive vision system, Fennec robot. We got a lot of stuff we're going to do in here. And it's all of it is connected via Ethernet, okay? So when it comes to setting up the Ethernet, remember, we need to set up a static IP address. And remember, our static IP address is like 192.168.1.xxx. So when I go to set up, that device, you can come in here, and let's just, people like to do it different ways. I can type control panel. Let's just, you want to get in there to the control panel. Let's see what this looks like. And if I go to network and sharing center, that's possibly one way to get into it. Everybody gets into it a little bit different. And then you can change your adapter settings right here. Okay. So I don't have a USB to Ethernet adapter plugged in here. Okay. But that's what we're going to be using. Right now you can see I have my network, here in my Wi-Fi. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in my USB to Ethernet adapter, and my USB to Ethernet. Let's be sure it goes in. Oh, there it goes. Yep. It's going to populate right there, and it says USB right there. So when I double click on this, I can go to my properties, and remember, we're doing TCP/IP4. Double click that, and it right now is set up to be dynamic. It would, get an IP address assigned, but because we're using a static network, we're going to use 192.168.1, and then the XXX. It needs to be a unique identifier that is not going to conflict with any of the other devices, any of the other 192.168.1.xxx devices. They all need to have a separate number here. So I don't know, 123. And then when I do this, it'll populate the subnet mask. Okay. Now we are going to leave the default gateway blank, but when we eventually get going and we get the Stratix switch set up, the Stratix switch, it's VLAN 1 that's reaching out to your computer, is how are we going to reach out to the network, okay? And so what that looks like is, we have your computer here, okay, and it's going to be hooked in to the 5700 switch. Now this 5700 is the gateway. It can go out to the World Wide Web. It can go out to your .10 network. It can go out to your .20 network, or your .30 network, or whatever. This is going to be the gateway that your computer is going to be looking through in order to get to these things right here. So if your switch has already been assigned with that item, where this thing went, wow, there it is. if it's already been assigned a static IP address, because that's what we're going to manage that 5700 switch and give it a static IP address. Let's say it was 192.168, and let's make it a one network, even though it's going to have multiple VLANs on it, .10 networks, .20 networks, .30 networks. We just leave it at one, and then whatever that switch is, something like that, that would say that our USB to Ethernet adapter, which is 123, is talking to the 200. So our computer here is, the 123.123, and this is talking to the 200. And these are on .1 networks, okay? And that's going to be our gateway there. So, we did a little bit of that, but you do need to know how to get in here and set this up. But because we don't have any other VLANs set up right now, yeah, you can just kind of leave this. You can kind of leave this blank right here, and then you can set up to your USB to Ethernet adapter. So hopefully you remember how to do that. There's different ways by clicking on the network in here. Some people like to type out network and sharing center, and some people, there's all kinds of different ways to get it. But there you go. But that's what we're talking about with the network gateway. And there's instructions throughout the lectures here and the labs as we keep talking about the networking that we want to be sure to set this up, okay? Like I said, you'll see a couple of, depending on where you're at, some of the static switches are going to be set up with that. So here's just a couple things that you can read about here. I don't need to read word for word, but up to now we've used unmanaged switches where we don't care. One port can see all the other ports, okay? And one of the things we did was like Siemens, okay? And so the Siemens unmanaged switch was like this, where you plug in here, and your partner plugs in here, and then you got PLC, HMI stuff in here. Everybody can just see it. Everybody can just see all the other equipment. As a matter of fact, you could have, a couple Siemens here, you could have downloaded into your buddy's CPU if you wanted to, as well as into your CPU if you wanted to add it. But this was just an unmanaged switch, and that's, we've done a lot of that. Now, even the 5700 switches that we were using up to this point were unmanaged. We hadn't been using them, okay? And so once again, these can be set up. They use an auto negotiated port, so when they start talking to each other, they figure out whether they're going to talk on half duplex or full duplex. If you remember, that is full duplex is where both can kind of try and talk at the same time, versus half duplex where there's like maybe one can talk, then the other can talk. The thing would be like a walkie-talkie. When you're talking on a walkie-talkie, and as soon as you push a button, you kill the other guy. You kill the signal. The network doesn't work. You have to take turns, and they have no concept of VLANs. VLANs, virtual LANs, would be in that managed switch. You could create multiple virtual networks, and I talked about .10, .20, .30 networks. All right, and they do maintain some control or keep track of the MAC number. So if you remember, the MAC address is like the VIN number, okay, and that's kind of how the switch keeps track of of what's connected to it. So just to be aware that that's what the MAC address. It's the hardware. It's a unique identifier number for that device. And then we talked about collision and non-collision versus token sharing. So this is not a token sharing network. A token sharing network that we talked about was like DeviceNet, where DeviceNet had a trunk line, if you remember. It had a trunk running down the middle, and then all the other devices were running off of this trunk. And so if it's token sharing, what happens is if you got the token right here, then you get to use the network, okay? And then what you do is you give up the token, and you might give it to this person or this piece of equipment, and then they get to use the network. And when you're done using the network, they pass the token on to the next one. Versus we're doing a collision detect network. And so a collision detect network, it works very fast. That if two devices kind of talk, or the signals run, the signals collide in the layer 2 boundary, then they stop, and then they wait like a random amount of time, and then one will try again, and the other will try again, and take over the network and send their message. Okay, so that's what a collision detect network is, kind of what we're dealing with there. Just not very not smart. Just just the old-fashioned network with a lot of speed. Throw some speed at it and some signals at it. Okay. Now the managed switch, we can then adjust all the port settings so that we can monitor the traffic going through each one of those ports. That some ports can see, some can't. And we'll get into this a little bit more about our simple network management protocol, where we can manage those ports, create different VLANs for those ports that we want, because each one of those switch ports can be configured as a trunk, and it can process tag data frames with VLAN IDs for each port, separately. That one port can see each other, and maybe one can't, or maybe one port gets to see everybody else and access them. We can really do some cool things with that. And the last thing is the managed switches have a remotely accessible console, like a command line interface. So what's cool to do, and I don't know, I have it set up here. I'm actually not currently plugged in, but you can see right here, my 1783 is my Stratix 5400 managed switch, okay? And that is 172.16.1-1. That was my static network I'm using, 117.16-1-1. Well, it's not plugged in right now, but if I did 172.16.1.1, you see I'm there. If I was connected, when I click this, it would pull up the interface to the switch. It would directly connect to the switch, and with that, it would get the way that you can modify the switch and everything like that. So if you do get to class and you want to mess with it, and you do have a managed switch, look at links here and see what the number of your switch is, and then go to a browser here and then click it, and it's going to tell you when you do this. It's like, hey, I don't like this. I don't like. It's not going to say like minus here. It's going to say, hey, this is not good. And you go to advanced, and then you allow it to connect to the switch, and then you'll see it will pull up some stuff. Don't change anything on it though, because it could get a little gnarly there. Okay. So what we're going to do in this first lab is we're going to use all this hardware, all this software, and these our switches and everything, and our US to Ethernet adapters and AB to set up the new equipment. Okay. And so the lab involves boot P to assign an IP using Control Flash and Control Flash Plus and USB to Ethernet to set this up. And once again, what's critical here is you went to the RA Download Center, right? That RA Download Center, you did that, and there it is, Download Center right there. You created an account, and you get logged in so that you can do the lab. That's the RA Download Center. Okay. So when a piece of equipment, say a controller or Ethernet bridge or whatever you get from Allen Bradley that's Ethernet, when it comes to you, it's a unique Ethernet device. It's going to have a hardware or a MAC address, but it's not going to have a static IP address. So one of the things you may want to do is assign an IP address to a static. It's going to come to you, and it's going to be set to DHCP, dynamic host protocol, where it's trying to randomly get one or to be broadcasting. When we give a static IP address, it's going to be fixed onto that network that we want. Okay. So one thing we could do is use the boot P to assign an IP. So your boot P bootstrap protocol is something that you can launch down here. And we've had some problems with these computers. You might have to do a little searching to find this if for some reason your computer locks you out. The first group did it and got through. But if I take a look at boot P, yikes, do I have it up here? Let's see if I can find it. Boot P, there's my DHCP tool. Okay. And so when it comes up, it just wants to know what am I connected to. All right. And so the lab just kind of talks you through, get rid of all this stuff, because you're like, I don't know, if you pick one, I don't know, I'll pick, let me see, if I pick this, it's going to start scanning for connected devices. Okay. And what it's going to do is any device on the network, and I don't know if I have any devices on this network or not, because I just took this computer from upstairs and took it down here, and I didn't broom out, any of the stuff that I have going here. So it still thinks it's there, but it's not finding anything anyways. But it'll start populating tons of stuff because it's kind of listening to the network. And you're like, well, is this my new Allen Bradley device? And the next one, is this my new Allen Bradley device? Is this my new Allen Bradley device? You don't know. So when you do this, a lot of times what I do is I turn off all NICs. I just turn the network interface connections, wireless off. I unplug, any kind of USB adapters, anything like that. And then I plug the device directly into my computer. And I set my computer to the static IP address I want. And then I just plug it directly in there. And that way, when I start listening, when I go back and I pick my path there, there's only one path to pick, okay? And so I'll launch that again because once again, it kind of came up with all those different paths. I got set up. When I unplug everything and turn everything off, all the Wi-Fi is turned off, anything like that, it only gives me one thing. And when I click that, then when it starts searching for stuff, the only thing that it's even connected to is my Allen Bradley item. And then when that pops up there, boom, I click it. It comes in this window. I can set the static IP address. I can cycle it, and then away we go. So we were using boot P to assign it. We're also going to do the easier way, USB A to B using RS links. Obviously, you're going to like that newer equipment, but sometimes it doesn't work, And then we'll talk about Ethernet. You can set it with Ethernet. You can set it with DF1, on the older stuff. So, or some of the older controllers. So there's different ways that you would have to go in and set this. And so I talk about isolating Ethernet boot. And then it says IP or firmware first. Okay. So here's an example. And there's older equipment, newer equipment, whatever. But here's an older Ethernet bridge. Actually, that on the bottom here is where you connect the Ethernet into this. That RJ45 goes into the bottom of this. But when you get this, it does not have an IP address. And therefore, you need to connect to this to update the firmware. So in this case, you have to set the IP address first so that you have a communications path so that you can do the firmware. And so this is a big pain in the butt. I am telling you what, or an older controller is a big pain in the butt. Whereas, if you get something newer that has a US A to B on it, well, then you can set the IP easily. You could, depending on how new it is, you could possibly update the firmware using A to B. Or if you do set the IP on it, you can use Ethernet to quickly update the firmware on it. So IP first or firmware first. Newer equipment, you can do the firmware first. Older equipment, you got to do the IP first because you can't connect to it, all right? And so those are just the different ways that we're going to show you, okay? So once again, in-class activities with new AB, you need to identify the firmware with RS links or RS logic. You can use RS links and RS logic to look into these devices, to look at device properties, to see what the firmware is, what revision they are. And you know that when we were putting these different cards into our programs, that's where we were talking about, did we want to disable keying? Did we want an exact match? That kind of stuff. Otherwise, they're not, your computer program or your project might not like them. If this was not the exact same revision, or this was not the exact same revision that you had set up in Studio 5000, well, you can just click on this and it will tell you what the revision, stuff like this. And links will help you. It will show you where we're at with some of this modular configuration using links, and we'll go through the lab with that, okay? And so we can update using a communications path. You got to get a communications path. Is it Ethernet, USB, DF1, whatever? You got to get the communication path. USB or Ethernet are kind of typical. And then we'll use Control Flash or Control Flash Plus, and we'll also do it out of Studio 5000 to learn how to update this firmware, okay? So the firmware files. You may have to download firmware files from your new AB Download Center account. Okay, so you might have to go in there and download stuff. And so, for example, If I wanted to download something, let me see if I can find something for you guys. If I wanted to do 1756 L55, there it is. That's a really old processor right there, okay? But if some reason I needed to flash one of those, and I came in here and it's showing the different processor, I can look at my available downloads here for this processor, okay? And so that's what I'm looking at right here, L55. Notice, RS Logic is 5000. It doesn't even show Studio 5000. It will not run on this, which, by the way, means it will not run on Windows 11 or Windows 10. If you have this, you're going to need it'll run on Windows XP, but you're going to need a VM, a virtual machine, to get this to run. But it says the highest it goes is 16.023. And if I slide down over here, here's version 16. These green check arrows means that it's compatible and I can download those things. Now, I know that this runs on these older items here, but the thing is, these are so old, they might not want you to get these, but sometimes you have to. That's what you got to run on, or you got to bring this processor, this L55. You got to flash the firmware version up, and the highest that you can go is 16. So you got to find the firmware for this, the 16, and then it will work with 16 version of the software. But that's what this is right here. This is the firmware revision of it, okay? And so, by the way, let's see if I can find that. Let's see if I can find RS Logix 5000. Is it going to find it? There it is, RS Logix 5000. And available downloads. Let's see what this says. And so RS Logix 5000 went up to like 21 or something like that. It went up to 20. Okay, so that's saying that I could download up to 20. But you know what? If you need more, if you need like if you have that processor, you're going to need 16 because it doesn't go higher than 16. Okay, but if you have a L32E, that goes up to 20, and you're going to need this one right here, 20.06. But notice there isn't a lot of green here because they're not super excited about you downloading this older stuff with these older controllers. They want you to buy the new stuff, all right? And so if you hover over here, there's an important notice that says that you need to ask for permission to download this stuff. But you can if you have older equipment. Usually that's the excuse you use. But when it says select files here, it looks like I can get 18, 19, 20, 21. But if I need 16, if you have L55, you need 16. It does not go higher than that. Then you got it, then come in and download it. And if you want something else, you got to ask for permission, okay? So a couple other things. You have to download firmware. This is interesting. Generally, when you install a new version of software, like, I put on Logix 5000 or Studio 5000 version 37. Usually that brings in the latest peripheral files and global programs are updated and everything like that up to 37. For example, when I brought that in, the latest version of RS Links, the latest version of Factory Talk Activation, the newest EDS files and everything, they get installed with it. And that's great, okay? But that doesn't mean that if I have 37, that it comes with 36 or 35 or 34 or 32 or 31 or, all the way back here to 6, 7, 8. It doesn't come with any of this. If you want 33 if you want a processor running on 33, and that's what it's flashed to, and you want to run Studio 33, then you got to download 33. And what it will do is it will bring down the firmware needed to flash stuff at 33, or you want 28, it has to be installed separately. Studio 5000 has to be installed separately 28, but it will bring down the software if you need to flash your devices to 28. So just be aware that it's a little bit confusing. Sometimes it works for you. Sometimes you have to go to your download center, like I was showing you, and you got to look for it yourself, okay? So control flash. So this is the older way to flash components, all right? It can just be launched on its own, or you can launch it from Studio 5000. We'll do both. and you will have to download any firmware you want beforehand, okay? So if you know that you want to flash something to 16 or whatever, then you got to come and you got to download this file right here, this 16 whatever firmware revision, okay? And so then when you go to control flash, it looks like this, control flash, and I go next, okay? And you can see that your programs are here. That is the 1756 M16. That's the L55 that I was talking about. But notice, oh, there's my L55 right there. I have already been to this site and already downloaded this so that when I launch this program, it comes up. Okay, so when I click next there, I need to go and find a path. It's not going to let me do one, unfortunately, because I don't have it hooked up. Okay, but let's say I did. Oh, hang on. Let's just do this anyways. Next, if I click, I'm going to click this and just let me take it. No, I don't have anything. It's not going to let me do it. But if I did next, what it would ask me next is what version I would like to flash this to. And I think on my computer, I've already downloaded 16, 13, 11, and 9 off of here because I've got different things running at that or whatever. And so it would be available to me to download, okay? But you have to download it first. Now, what I was saying was if you brought in let's say a certain revision level, like a 28 of Studio 5000 or something, it likely brings a lot of this stuff with it. Okay, there's a lot of this stuff with it, but when you bring in version 33, that means that when you go to flash this one right here, and it asks you what revision level you would want, if you installed 33 would be available to you. But what if I want 32? Well, it's not available. You either need to download, install all of Studio 5000 number 32, or you could just go and pick out the very specific driver for that processor for 32. But if you just bring all the entire software or package in, you could get that version of it, okay? But there's all your processors. So this is a bit of a bear to use right here, control flash. But we will get into it. I want to send that. I will send that. I'll end it. That's fast. So do a little control flash. All right. And a lot of times that's used for downloading older ones, but you have to have the download done ahead of time. Now, control flash plus is a newer way to flash components, and it can be launched on its own, or you can launch it from Studio 5000, and you're going to get better results if you're signed into the AB Download Center, okay? And so if I come to Control Flash Plus, it looks like this, all right? And basically, you need to set up a path of communications. Again, it's probably not going to like it. Well, yeah, there's all my items. I have a lot of red here because I'm not hooked into anything. But when you establish your path, it's going to look out there and find what devices are on your network. Let's say I had this L71 right here. Let's say I had that L71 processor in. Well, then when I go to field my devices, it's going to give me all the firmwares for L71. If I want to flash it to 33 or 32 or 31 or 30 or 29 or 28 or whatever, it's going to let me pick. I don't need to download each one individually, or I don't need to install the Studio 5028 package or the Studio 5026 package, the whole package. It's just going to let me pick that. So this really is a much better way to go. But you got to, if I had devices, it would populate here, okay? And so there's an item here to talk about what firmware, I have on here. And so if you look at L71, these are the ones that are on my computer. And the reason these are on my computer is because if I launch Studio 5000 and try to start a new program, I could do it in version of 33 or 30 or 28 or 24. Okay, I wonder if I could do that in 21 or 20. Maybe it does. If I flashed my processor to those, these are the versions of Studio 5000 that I actually have loaded on my computer, but what if I wanted a 29? Well, I'd have to, probably put Studio 5029 on my computer, at which point this would populate. Or if I just wanted to do 29 and I didn't have 29 on my computer, because I'm in the download center at this point, you can, if you went to Field Devices, you can go to the download center, latest from download center, and pick that. Okay, but it makes you think, why would I want my CPU flash to 29 when I don't have Studio 5029 on my computer? But if you bring Studio 5029 on your computer, it will pop up right here. Okay, and so, like I said, is there an L55 on here? There's L60s. There's my L55. Those are the versions, because on my computer I got 13 and 16 on mine, and so if I get L50, I can flash these. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. Doing a lot of talking about it, hope it makes sense. Now, the Control Flash Plus version 5.0 is currently working, even though 6.0 is available. This is a typical Allen Bradley situation. They've got software that doesn't work. So version 6.0 wasn't working. I went out on the web, and as of like July 20th or something, they have an announcement on their website that version 6.0 of Control Flash Plus does not work. The recommended fix is to uninstall it and install version 5.0. Great. Okay. The problem with 5.0 is I don't know that I don't know that it goes all the way up to the current release 37. It might only go up to 33 or 34. But we will get through this hurdle as we go. But just be aware that that's just typical of Allen Bradley to do that. Okay. So then what we have is the configuration lab. And that's where you just want to be careful. You can hot swap a bunch of this stuff, but at times I ask you to kind of turn it off, turn it on. I will get you the equipment that you need. You're going to get a processor and get it flashed, and you'll get your bridge flashed. And you'll mess around with boot P and Control Flash Plus, Studio 5000, Ethernet connections, managed switch, and just start looking at commissioning all of this equipment, and then and then getting it and getting it working. So that's what we got going on for the first week, and I will be talking to you about how do we get everybody back on track and where we're at.